welcome everybody to today's masterclass on how civil engineering firms are implementing AI utility mapping in their day-to-day. We have special guests with us today, Wes Kaisershot, Director of Engineering at SurvWest, and Fred Garza, Director of Utilities and SUE at CivilCorp. I'm Chris Garafola, and I am the Senior Content Manager here at 4M Analytics, and I'll be moderating the discussion here today. But before I introduce you to our amazing host and panelists, I wanted to walk through a couple housekeeping items. So first and foremost, today's webinar will be recorded, and you will receive the on-demand recording within the next week or so. And if you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to drop your questions below in the Q&A section or the chat. We'll try to leave about 5 or 10 minutes at the end to answer any questions that you may have. And so, yeah, without further ado, I'd love to go around the horn and have everybody introduce themselves. And so why don't we start with my amazing colleague and host, Lizzie Laster, Director of Customer Success at 4M Analytics.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, everyone. My name is Lizzie Laster, and I am the Director of Customer Success, as he mentioned, here at 4M Analytics. I am very happy to meet with our wonderful customers, Wes and Fred, today, talking to you guys about AI utility mapping and how this fits into the space today. Fred, how about you go?
Hello, everyone. Fred Garza, Director of Utilities and SUE at CivilCorp. Been on both sides of the house, the civil engineering side and also the utility side. So it's a unique experience going from one side to the other. But also with over 20 years experience, I've seen a lot change. So we'll be talking more about that a little bit later.
Wes.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Lizzie. Thank you, Chris. Wes Kaisershot, Director of Engineering at SurvWest. We're a small company that offers 3 strong services of survey, subsurface utility engineering, and utility coordination. A little background on myself: I've worked in different sectors, both the private, both the federal government and the state. And in the 25+ years that I've been in the industry, I've somehow been around utilities and utility conflicts my whole career. So I have a real appreciation for what this panel and what we're going to be talking about today. So been with SurvWest for just a bit, and really glad to be connected and have a great relationship with 4M Analytics.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys both so much for being here today. As we jump in, I think we're going to start at a 50,000-foot view of how the industry has traditionally approached utility mapping. And so what I might first start off asking you guys is to walk me through what it looked like, let's say, 5 years ago in the utility mapping industry. And then let's dive into what it looks like today for each of you. And so, Wes, I might start kind of with you. Tell me about what the industry was like 5 years ago for you today.
So five years ago, in the utility mapping, subsurface utility engineering world, been following a standard put out since 2002. It didn't have artificial intelligence, version of records collection, but it always had records collection. And so going along with, calling 811 at whatever state you're at, seeing who's in the corridor, maybe asking your owner or your client if they have any permits or utility investigations that have been done before, gathering every kind of record you could, and then having to really go, the traditional old-fashioned way, pick up the phone and call, even go in the field and look for phone numbers on flags that are stuck in the ground. I mean, every way you could possibly go to try to get into that telecommunication company, the natural gas company, and then waiting for a long time for records, maybe never getting the records, maybe just having to send your crews out and say, this is the best we have, go find some markers and go find those lines. So it's been the traditional way that, honestly, as of this time that we're talking, most firms are still doing it that way. This AI is bringing it in kind of a new approach and a new strategy. But 5 years ago, that's the way it was going, was very traditional, following that 3802 standard that's now been updated a year ago. And of course, more great things to come with more updates, probably going to have more of the AI component in it. But 5 years ago, let's just say minus AI, doing everything as we normally did.
That I hadn't even thought about how those flags used to have phone numbers on them. I can think of them in my front yard growing up. Never
Yeah.
crossed my mind that someone might call from there. So that
Right.
made me laugh a
Right.
little bit, childhood nostalgia popping in. Fred,
Right.
what about you? What do you think about when you remember 5 years ago, the industry? What did it look like for you? How did anything different from what Wes said?
I think Wes nailed it pretty much with the standardization portion of it. 20 years ago, there wasn't a whole lot of standardization. And here about 5 years ago or more and more standardization was being presented. And everybody was pretty much getting on board. Wes also mentioned 3802. So that helped quite a bit in our industry. But 5 years ago, even just 5 years ago, you didn't have the technology that we have today, the smartphones and the pads that we use today and the connections to all of that we utilize today. I mean, a faster and faster internet, and some of the utility stuff that's out there that we deal with is getting us that speed through fiber and other means and wireless. So we're all most of the time hooked up to our cell phone because there's so much information coming from that source, and that's the improvement in telecommunications. So I think things have definitely gotten better, and I expect them to continue.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question on that, because you mentioned some of the challenges there, like even the internet or like the telecom world becoming any better. What were some of the largest challenges outside of looking on the flags in your front yard? I'll stick to that for the rest of my life. Wes. Fred, so what were some of those challenges? No, it's a great one. It's a good like nostalgic memory, right? Fred, you mentioned one, right? Like the internet's faster now. What were some of those other challenges that you had with some of the traditional ways of finding utilities? There's a plural and not typically always.
Well, I mean, one of the biggest challenges is the distance between you and the project. Because if the project's more than say 100 miles from where you're sitting, it becomes a big challenge travel-wise and time-wise, et cetera, et cetera. So, Texas is a big state. If you haven't crossed Texas, then you don't realize how many hours it takes to get across Texas. So living in Texas and a lot of our business being in Texas, distance is a huge factor. So even what we're doing right now in terms of having a meeting where we can see everybody and talk to everybody is a huge plus. COVID changed pretty much everything with regards to doing these types of get-togethers, and I can't emphasize enough the increase in speed, internet speed, because we really couldn't do any of these things 20 years ago. I tried really hard 20 years ago to try to do this, but the advancements here in the last few years have gotten a lot better. So distance is one thing, getting the right data from the right people is another thing. Getting the resources in terms of workforce that understand utilities is quite another thing. The marriage between utilities and civil engineering is another thing that's been a bit of a hurdle, but it's gotten a lot better.
You mentioned the workforce and like marrying that with utilities. I'm going to get to that kind of later on today of talking about how do you take utilities and what kind of like talent do you need still with today's technology to have successfully like work in the utility space. But before we do that, I want to make sure there's a couple of things, but Wes, I'll pass to you. He mentioned some of the challenges today, how we're solving some of those. Zoom is a great thing. Think about 20 years ago, we certainly couldn't do this. Today, if it snows, children do school on Zoom. 20 years ago, if it snowed, I didn't have to do school. So there's pros and cons to the the world today, right? In a children's perspective. But from you, what do you think about when you think, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced 5 years ago? And maybe I'll split it a little bit more, that maybe even that you're still facing.
Yeah, I think we always face the challenges, but with innovative technology, the challenges are starting to get smaller. Clients usually, when they want utility information, they want it right away. They're not necessarily appreciating the fact that it's going to take weeks or sometimes a couple months to get full utility record data. That's actually when they want their deliverable. That's when they want their 3D deliverable, whether it's a nice map of existing utilities on page or a CAD or MicroStation file, 3D modeled. They want it now. So the traditional challenges, yeah, in the past, the challenges were time. And then as I looked at budgets, as I looked at time charged to projects that I've managed before, you would see 40 or 50 hours of someone just working, maybe 10 hours one week, 15 the next, 10 the next, and it would add up to sometimes a week or week and a half of just spending trying to rain down those utility records. And that was so that you could get a little bit of a composite, because we've been using iPads and laptops for a long time now in the industry. But in order to get something on there, in order to make your KMZ something that was useful in the field by our designators and our technicians, it would take a long time. So that was some of the challenges then. We obviously are here talking about some of the fixes of those challenges, but time really, and by that time that you're finally starting, and again, the client's wanting that utility information now. So a lot of hours charged to the project without a whole lot of results and not meeting the client's needs.
Time. That's a huge thing that we hear about a lot. And so the next section, the thing I do want to kind of flow into is talking about technology as a solution. And we'll certainly touch on time, because I think that that's a really key piece that you talk about, not just in the research, but even once you go out into the field, how do you optimize that time as well? And so before we dive into that, one of the other things that we had talked about wanting to cover, even in today, is talking about the huge demand for infrastructure, as well as sort of a shortage of engineers that exists that can, successfully use this utilization data, and how to, actively, still proactively in the field. And what kind of challenges are you seeing within the field today with the shortage of engineers with infrastructure needs? And so I will start this one with Wes, because last we started with Fred.
That's what's in our playing field now too, right? You have federal monies coming in, you have a whole lot of infrastructure, but yet there's such a demand for good labor out now, right now. And so it's hard to fill those roles. And so AI utility mapping is coming in and actually helping fill some of those, where you can get it to the CAD techs quicker, you can get it to the project managers quicker. And I guess you could even, the question had shortages of civil engineers. Often the civil engineer is the one who's kind of the record in charge over the whole deliverable, but really any personnel that you're trying to recruit, because everyone's vital, from the technician gathering the information in the field to the engineer signing and sealing the deliverable for the client. That's been a big issue, just not enough people for the amount of demand. So I think it's a breath of fresh air to see something come in like AI, artificial intelligence mapping of utilities to shorten that a little bit, or maybe help until you get those right people in place. You still can keep processes moving and show the client that you're getting some information. So definitely a challenge, because the projects aren't going away. We're all in a good business and infrastructure. There's going to be a demand for it for some time to come.
Right. And Fred, how are you guys at CivilCorp overcoming these challenges that Wes and his team are also facing?
Well, let me just touch a little bit on the foundation of what you're talking about there. Sure. 20, 30 years ago, when you were talking about a roadway, and the infrastructure, it was relatively straightforward. You might have some bridges, and you might have some drainage. It's no longer that straightforward anymore. I mean, now you got ITS, you got cameras everywhere. You got message boards. I mean, you got Amber Alerts, all kinds of different things that in the past we didn't have to deal with. And so with that said, the diversity of talent for each specialty is pretty vast. So finding that talent for a particular specialty is difficult. And then when you do find it, you know, there's other people wanting to get that particular individual. So now you got to be creative in keeping them. So it's a big balance, but the one positive about all that is technology. You know, so technology itself and AI is kind of helping to balance that out, because where it took 4 or 5 different talents to put together a utility layout sheet, for instance, in the past, may now with AI, you know, and companies like 4M and Google Earth and those types of companies that are out there to help, it becomes less and less labor intensive. So it's kind of a strange thing to watch in real life. You almost want the AI people, you know, the AI programs, algorithms, whatever you want to call them, to hurry up and do their thing faster and better. And at the same time, you still need the resources to get it done.
Right. I had not even thought about, you guys keep bringing things to my brain, the message boards and how those require utilities and things to run those even as well. So had not even, now when I see one of those, Fred, I'll think of you every time. One of
All right.
very cheesy messages that always make me giggle. Awesome. Well, so you kind of led us into it here. We're talking about the challenges in the infrastructure, or the challenges with the shortage of people, with the demand for all this infrastructure, and how technology is both adding more utilities to the road, but also helping solve some of these problems. And so, Fred, can you talk to me a little bit about maybe how technology, specifically the AI, is helping you overcome these challenges? You talked about you wanted to go a little bit faster even every single day, right? But what is it doing today that's helping you solve these problems that you guys were facing 5 years ago that hopefully you're not facing as much today? Can you talk to me a little bit about some of the AI that you guys are using today?
Sure. Well, the AI that we utilize today is such a blessing in the sense that, you know, we can get utility mapping in days, you know, and we can get utility mapping for miles on end in days. If somebody were to tell me that, you know, just 5 years ago, I would say that they were crazy. So in 5 years, we made a huge advance in the time frame that we can get stuff done. So obviously, anybody who's watching this knows that time equals money, and you know, so anyone who's doing a project nowadays, especially large projects, they want the information right away, because from an engineering standpoint, they want to know right away what are going to be my biggest conflicts on a particular project. So the sooner you get them that information, the sooner they can start attacking those projects. Obviously, safety is a big concern. So when you provide that information on gas lines or any high voltage electrical that may be underground or above ground, the sooner they can get that information, the sooner they'll know where to put a bridge or move a bridge or move a particular structure that needs to get moved. Gas lines are another one that are a big issue in our industry. So the sooner you get that information, the better it is for them.
So can you walk me through maybe an example where you were able to use this AI data and quickly identify those things and how that impacted your project, both timeline and safety?
I'll give you a couple examples. One from the inception of what I'll call a huge advance in technology. And that one is basically the premise even today for a lot of what we do. And that's Google Earth and Google Maps. because they give us the luxury of looking at a particular place from our desktop or from our laptop. And so we don't, I talked about distance earlier. Now that distance gap has almost been eliminated. It's never as good as being there. I'll tell you that much. But it's the second best thing you can do. So just a quick example, in California, I was doing a project. Remember I talked about money and time. PG&E wanted to charge our project for moving a pad-mounted transformer, which would have been a lot of money. And it all depended on when that pad-mounted transformer was placed in that particular area. Well, at that point in time, one of my utility coordinators said, there's no way we can find out when that thing got put in there because there's no documentation. Anyway, we were running into a dead end. So I pulled up Google Earth and used the history button and found out when that pad-mounted transformer was there based on Google Earth. I contacted PG&E, lo and behold, they said, there's nothing for us to dispute now. I guess we have to pay for it. So that was the first huge step in being able to sit in your chair in your office and getting something like that resolved in a matter of, I would say, minutes, if not a couple of hours. Fast forward to today, AI and gathering the information on a project from a proposal standpoint is huge, because now if someone tells me, hey, I got this project in Midland, Texas, and it's from this mile marker to this mile marker, it'll only take me, maybe a minute or two to pull up, a heat map to tell me the density of the utilities in that area, and then maybe just a couple of days to get the actual line work for that area. And if there's a presentation, if I find this out on Monday, there's a presentation on Friday, guess what? I'm ready by Friday with line work, which is a huge advancement to the way we used to do things.
Well, thank you, Fred, for that. Google Map kind of started the whole thing, right? It kind of allowed a lot of companies to pave ways from there. Wes, almost same question, right, for you, and maybe even add a little bit of like how you're doing it today as well with that versus just what tools have been added.
Yeah, so the use of AI now is pretty neat. And if I could share like a story of a project. So what it's actually helping us do at SurvWest is find new clients and let them consider us because of our approach of using AI. The levels of SUE go from quality level D all the way to quality level A, level D being the least uncertain, level A being the most certain location of where that utility is, both in the X, Y, and Z elevation, right? So we are able to go now with AI, we're able to go to a client and say, how would you like for a very cost-effective approach just to know all the utilities that are there? Fred mentioned how quickly now with the Google Earth, the Google Maps, now with 4M, which is the Google Maps of the underground, right? Is I think one of your taglines. So how quick it is now, and we can provide an overall composite drawing of where all the utilities are, an inventory, if you will. Maybe not specifically where they are to the foot, hopefully the right side of the road, but in that corridor, they know what they're dealing with. And then we can go to that same client and say, well, here's what you're dealing with. And we can get that very quick so we can move on to the next phase. AI and Form Analytics has helped us get to that first step so that we as a SUE firm can offer then those higher levels of investigation. And clients are really opening their eyes. And instead of them having proposals for hundreds of thousands of dollars of subsurface utility engineering, we can go much less than that. And then we can go into areas where we found their utilities. They know where their conflicts are. They know where they're going to bore under the road. They know where they're going to put their drainage structures. They know where a driveway is being placed as a DOT working on a highway. And we can go in and say, okay, in these areas, we can provide further levels of SUE. AI and these new modern tools that are out there, like Forum Analytics, are helping us actually use the quality levels in a more strategic way to serve the client. They really like the cost effectiveness of it, and then they actually never pay for data that they're not going to use. We're able to go almost like a surgeon. We're able to go into that one area and do surgery of the highway or the infrastructure, rather than just, you know, showing them a map of everything, sending them a bill, and then they don't even use 3/4 of that information. So it's really helping us be strategic as a company, and actually is helping us gain a foot into some customers that maybe had been using another firm that is still doing it that way, like your first question 5 years ago.
Yeah. So I'll take you through story time. You guys gave a lot of maybe high level generals of how you guys are using this data. So I'll put the question back out to both of you guys. Are you able to give a specific example, walk me through story time of what you've done in the last 6 months with a customer that, you know, let's say using Forum, right? Let's do it. Using Forum, how you were able to take advantage of the AI and what kind of benefits and value added that you guys got for your customers. I get to pick who's going first. Yeah, there you go. Sorry, I forgot to pick who gets the top.
The very beginning of our use of 4M, you could almost say that it was kind of our beta test to see if this relationship was going to be good. It might come up in a question you have in the future, but for me in the past, I was skeptical. I was thinking rigidly rather than resiliently. I was thinking that AI was going to take my job and the jobs of others away. Now I'm seeing actually that it makes all of us more efficient in what we do at our jobs. So that's good. The specific story is downtown Denver, Colorado.
Okay.
This was back in February. Denver had an incredible amount of snow last year, but usually in Denver it melts within a day or two. This snow was stubborn and it stuck around. It became that really nasty looking stuff cornered off in the parking lots for a while, and it wouldn't melt. So they were having that issue. Well, we were assigned to go find utilities in downtown Denver, a very, very dense area, a lot of utilities. When we started partnering with 4M, within a couple weeks of partnering with 4M, we had a client that asked us that they knew about a natural gas line in downtown Denver, but we weren't showing it on our plans. And we said, well, we've sent designators out numerous times. It snowed us out another time. I think it had started raining. They had an incredible amount of rain too over the summer. And we went in there, and with the 4M data, drawing the polygon, it showed the gas line right away. So it showed information that even though we had gone through the traditional methods, and our designators are really good. Fred's designators are really good. Those in the SUE business, they wouldn't be if they weren't. You can't just go out there and pretend you're finding utilities. They're buried underground. It's hard to pretend to do that right. But this AI and the historicalness of knowing when those lines were placed found those utilities right away, and the client was like, whoa, we knew we were there. That's so cool. Thank you for showing us that. That was a story of where it worked very, very well for us in a very dense area that, you know, how many times we're going to keep sending crews out? The project was already out of budget. So in order to be able to do that with AI and quickly see where those two gas lines were down along, I think it was Broadway Street in Denver, Colorado, really, really helped.
So what I'm hearing there is not only did it find a line that you guys were unable to really track down time, right? If we had done this in the get-go, we would have had all those people out there, we would have saved that time that we talked about earlier. Is that a fair kind of read back?
Yeah, exactly. Well, if we had the data up front, then our designators would have went out and confirmed it was there and had the idea where it was, or we would have at least shown it by record. So we could have at least put a SUE quality level to it and satisfy the client. Yep.
Told you we'd circle back to that time, and we did. Fred, what about you? Story time. Tell me about a time where you also were able to use 4M, and what kind of value and benefit did it have for you and for your customer?
Well, I'm going to mimic a bit of what Wes said because the technology is new. We We do SUE work, and so we know what levels we've gotten for a particular project. So one of our first hurdles was the trust hurdle. You know, how much can we trust this? And so, you know, we picked a project we had already done the SUE work on, and then requested the information for him just to see how much we could trust it. And it was pretty accurate based on what we had already had from the SUE information. So our trust went up at that point in time. And that wasn't even the advanced version. I know we'll probably talk about that a little more, but it was just a standard version of the AI from 4M utility mapping. So we utilized that just to trust it first. And then recently, within the last couple of months, we were going for a project in Austin. And, you know, we were kind of caught off guard a little bit in terms of getting together utility information for a presentation, because we were going to an interview. And so having experience working in the Austin area, the project is about 13 miles long, and there's going to be some pinch points out there, those intersections that are going to be a big concern. You have to start thinking in terms from an engineering standpoint. You know, where would I be the most scared in terms of intersections and, you know, in terms of utilities? So we picked two of the most, popular or most populous, I guess be the right way to say it, areas. And we got the AI utility mapping from 4M on that. And that was a big boost when it came to the interview and presenting that to the client, the potential client. And I think that was a big differentiator between us and a lot of other people that got interviewed. So we're thinking positively about that whole experience right now. And you know, based on what the reaction was from those interviewing us, I think they were impressed too. So we're happy to have it.
Yeah, I love that, because what you're saying is basically you had quick access to things and you're able to use your partnership with 4M and kind of that pursuit process, putting yourself a leg up, showing what access you have to data, and that it's, you know, you can confidently say what's going to be there at a quicker pace for them, right? So you both are now able to put yourself in a situation in more bids with more customers and prospects that you guys are, you know, embracing technology, allowing it to enhance and optimize what you guys are doing, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned something that I want to circle back on and ask about for adopting, right? Like there's trust things, right? This is new. Construction is an industry that has had its ways for many of years, and changing those ways can sometimes take time to build that rapport and trust. Can you talk to me, and I'll start with Fred this time, about implementing 4M and how you guys went about that adoption beyond just the one project was good and building trust? Like, what kind of steps did you guys go through? What did you look at, and the adoption process?
Well, you brought up a pretty good topic there, because I do have to tell you a story, and I'm not going to mention any names, but you know,
I can guess the name.
Probably not, but back in the day, you know, from a SUE standpoint, we do test holes to identify or locate utility. That's the highest level of certainty that we can have, because we actually view the pipe itself. Back in the day, some of the construction, we would call some of the construction companies are locators, which is not a good thing, because you brought up construction company, because you don't want the construction company finding the high pressure gas line. I was in that situation in a truck in the field, and the construction company hit a high pressure gas line, and I wasn't driving, and the person driving was about to turn the truck on, and I told him, don't touch that ignition key, because we were too close to the gas line, and you can imagine what might have happened. Anyways, we walked away instead of driving away. And I say that because I want to emphasize the things that really happen in the field when you hit a particular utility that is extremely dangerous to its surrounding. And, you know, that particular day, I'm not saying it would have happened, but it could have happened. If he turned that ignition key, you know, we might have gone up with that gas. So it's very important to try and get utility information as soon as possible because of those reasons. But the second reason is also the monetary reason. How much is that going to cost to fix that? So we've actually had situations that we talk about with the folks that are new to 4M and the AI situation, and they're starting to come around and saying, especially the construction contractors, which is surprising to me because I work with a lot of them. They're actually getting on board, I think, a little faster than some of the other people that we would expect to be on board. So I think the industry is starting to realize, maybe this is the new smartphone, if you will. And so it's time to change our mindset and start to use this a lot faster.
Yeah, that's a good point of like, this is new, right? We were all kind of apprehensive about smartphones when they first came out, and now they have changed everything that we do. They used to tell us we won't have a calculator everywhere we go in school, and well, yes, we do. It changes the way things work, right? And so it sounds like you are able to use that gas line story when working internally or with colleagues and peers and customers even to drive adoption and change it. You're just able to kind of use that example to overcome any sort of objectives. Is that a fair kind of read back there?
Yes.
Awesome. I loved that. That was a great story. And I'm glad to hear that you did not turn the engine on and are still here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Wes, what about you? What kind of challenges or obstacles do you guys face when adopting new technology? And how have you, we'll stick with the 4M train for this, but you can speak broadly. And how did you guys overcome that? I'm sure it took some time to build that trust.
Yeah, I think as we all know, the term leader is better than the term manager, because leaders inspire and managers control, and no one wants to be controlled. We can't control even if we think we are. So inspiration, I think, is how we're helping overcome those internal hurdles. Some of those internal hurdles are even project managers in our own company that might be hesitant still. Like, we don't need it, or it's not big enough project, or whatever. But the inspiration part is neat, and fortunately, a role that I get to have is, and I'll move this into story. But as you all get your word out to the industry, it makes me easier to overcome those hurdles and inspire others in my company. I was at a Austin airport event this morning where all the engineers and contractors that want to help totally build out Austin's airport that's really undersized for the 2.5 million people in the metro area here. And they were all there this morning, and I went up to one of the booths, and it was a company that knew of 4M Analytics. And as I talked about how we could help Sue and help with the utility investigation at the airport, he kind of looked at me and he said, "Have you heard of 4M Analytics?" I'm like, I have heard of 4M Analytics. We're working well with them. And he got very excited. So when we're out in the industry, when we're out doing our business development, and we're hearing other people that have heard of the technology of AI and 4M Analytics, that's really helping us then influence and overcome any hurdles that happen, where sometimes it's just well-meaning project managers within our own company that just are hesitant to want to do it that way. And as leaders, we get to inspire and do that. So I think that's some hurdles we had internal, and how to overcome them, and then just the success of what we've seen and the business opportunities that are coming from it as well. So hope that answered your question.
It did. After this, I want to know who you talked to. That was
a
fun little thing.
All right.
So there's two more questions that I have top of mind that I want to ask. And you mentioned, Fred, you touched on this a second ago as well. And Wes, I'll start with you on the answers here. 4M does offer two different levels of confidence, if you will. We offer a standard level of data delivery and an advanced level data delivery. So would you mind walking me through kind of the certainty, in your opinion, of levels, and how you strategically choose when to use what within your firm?
Okay, that was me first, Lizzie.
Yep, you can go first this time. This is fun.
So,
I get to point.
Good stuff. So standard and advanced. Honestly, and I've had these talks with all the way up to the founders of 4M, because SurvWest is a SUE company, we're finding the best strategic level right now is to get the standard data, because we are a SUE firm, and we will go out and we get boots in the ground to confirm it, to find any lines that maybe were missed, or see lines that we missed. It's my experience, it's been both ways, right? Artificial intelligence, machine learning, the machines are still learning. So, and that's another neat thing about our partnership, is the information we get back at the end can feed back to 4M, and then everything gets better the next time Fred orders the information, it's even better. So standard has been what we have done so far when our clients need a SUE deliverable, subsurface utility engineering. Advanced would be if we get in a role where another firm does the SUE work and we want to verify that, and we have some money in the budget. The advanced is good. And I say that, but as we continue to get more SUE opportunities and partner with 4M, the advanced is certainly going to come. We're going to find strategic projects to get the advanced information on. And I would say that is if, number one, the client's okay with that little extra budget, but also if they want that level of certainty up front, even more so before maybe our crews can get out in the field, is that we'll consider the advanced. So I look at the advanced level as maybe overseeing someone else's utility mapping work. But if we're going to do the utility mapping work, then the standard has been the way that we have mostly gone so far. But we're definitely open. We're always looking at both levels. But that's what we've done. That's been our approach so far.
Okay. And then, Fred, I'll ask you that same question. I have kind of a follow-up with how do we blend kind of traditional methods and the talents that like SUE field investigators do bring, right? How do we blend that with 4M? But Fred, let's maybe just start with kind of how do you guys differentiate when do you use standard versus advanced on your side?
That's a really good question. It really depends on the project, and the density of utilities. And I talked a little bit about this prior, but as an example, if you're building a bridge, you got drill shafts, and those drill shafts may be pretty wide. And if you have any utilities anywhere near those drill shafts, even within 5 feet, the kind of movement that they have when they're drilling those can affect those utilities. So it's extremely important to know exactly where these lines are. So we may, on a long section of freeway, for instance, where we don't have bridges and we don't have a lot of, I'll call it freeway features that we have to be concerned with, we may just go with the standard because we know that there's not going to be a high density of utilities in a particular crossing, for instance. On the other hand, if we do have a lot of density in a bridge area, then we'll probably go with the advanced. Some projects have a lot of density, period. So we start looking at it in terms of time and money, because if it's something that needs to get done, right away, then that's where 4M and AI make all the sense in the world, and going with the advanced problem. So those are the factors that we have to think about. So a lot of that is conversations between all the different disciplines, engineering disciplines, and then we make the most suitable decision from that point on.
Right. Well, you guys, we just keep circling back to how we're saving you guys time and money. That's what I'm hearing. So then let's blend that a little bit, because you talked about the different engineering disciplines, right? And so when you think about the talents or skill sets that's needed to be a good fit with utility work, let's blend. How do you blend AI and what is still needed from that talent and discipline perspective? So if we were to blend those two together, right? Can you talk about what's still needed outside of, all right, you get the utility mapping, you get it quicker. AI is not replacing everything. So what's still needed from a talent perspective now that that AI is starting to insert itself into the industry?
That's a very good question, because I always think in terms of, what's my Christmas list, if you will, on all of this. So the wish list at the, what's at the top of that, AI is doing a good portion of that, I'll say, because the difference between doing it the traditional way and having AI do it is that as long as the AI is reliable, we had people literally scouring through design, as built from utility companies, and I come from AT&T, so I know how many of those there are and how many pages are involved. But just for the audience, your project may be a mile long, but their project might have been 10 miles long, but the two happen to cross. But you're going to get 10 miles worth of data from them, sheets and designs and as-built, et cetera, and that's where a lot of people or a lot of companies lose a lot of time, because a lot of times they have to flip through each and every page to find exactly what they want, because they don't have, the legend, or they're missing a page telling them, where to go first. So there's a lot of time lost there. So blending AI into that scenario is huge. But we don't have to spend that much time anymore. And those are big projects, those are the bigger projects. And so that's from the talent perspective too. You have to start understanding how to read what AI is giving you and how to make the best of it. We talked a little bit about the standard and advanced version, but on the wish list, and everybody wants this and everybody doesn't know how to approach this yet, but on a wish list is to be able to see underground utilities from a 3D perspective, and for that information to be reliable. Because it's one thing to show it from a 3D perspective, but how do you make that information reliable? And so it's kind of, can we get to X-raying underground utilities? We got ground penetrating radar. And so the answer is kind of yes, but we still need to jump over that hurdle. So that's where we're at, technology-wise.
Yeah. Thank you for answering that question. I know that that's something that you guys are really passionate about. I was one of the first times I met you was a call about 3D and the future of AI. Wes, when you think about kind of that same question for you, how do we blend current AI with talent? What's still needed? What AI is definitely coming onto the scene. There's no question about that. How do we blend the talents of what you guys are able to provide with the AI?
Yeah, well, I definitely can answer the what's needed still, and it's really just continuing what Fred just said. In fact, he stole my thunder a little bit, because I was gonna talk about 3D Sue as well. So that you can see the fact that both Fred and I were about to answer your question the same way. That's the way the industry is going. The clients now don't just want nice colored orange, green, blue, and yellow lines on a paper with a nice legend and an engineer seal, and here's your deliverable, go on, and here's our bill. They want the conflict analysis. They want it to move towards utility coordination. They want that congested corridor that has all those utilities. Now we know where they are. How do we get them clear of this roadway? We're widening our road 2 lanes each way to accommodate growth in our cities. They want their utilities clear. They want right-of-way let dates. They want utility clearance dates. They want all of this very high-level information scheduled out. And that 3D Sue that Fred brought up is definitely the reason why is a conflict analysis, a clash analysis. So the 3D model now, compared to what everything else in the design and construction industry is going towards, which is digital construction, you're going to see 3D terrains of proposed earth. You're going to see 3D models of storm drain systems. You're going to see 3D models of pavement sections. So to have a 3D model of Sue, now you're going to be able to move those models around and say, wow, at this point, that existing water line impacts that new storm drain. They're going to go through each other. So that's a conflict. and now you're building a conflict list. So what's needed is even some nicer tools to get those conflict analysis and conflict matrices built, because that's a very time concerning and time laboring thing to sit down with a blank spreadsheet and start saying conflict number 1, water line owned by the city of Pflugerville, Texas, in conflict at station number. So you imagine doing that for 150 conflicts. I would say that's where it needs to go. It needs to go 3D, and it needs to start the clash analysis and the utility engineering side, which is utility coordination, which is utility conflict matrix development, so that the client knows, okay, there's all the utilities. That's great. Glad you showed us, but now who's going to help us, and which ones are in the way of the project? Which ones can stay where they're at?
Mm-hmm. Some deeper risk mitigation there as well. Yeah. I love that. Well, guys, I'm going to close it down with one final question for you today. And I think that is going to be, and I will start with you, Fred, here, of what advice would you give to engineering firms who have not yet, but are considering making a transition to using AI and technology for subsurface utility engineering needs?
I would say be a lot more open-minded to AI. The future is in AI because it's so much faster, so much more efficient, and it'll get you a lot more projects done in a shorter period of time.
Okay. I love that. Short and to the point, right? It's perfect. Wes, what about you?
So I heard it well said at a conference I was at recently, and it was someone up on the stage, and she said, in the short term, AI is probably not going to replace people, but people that use AI are going to replace people that don't use AI. So I leave it there as kind of a challenge, but also on the other side is it's okay to ask the questions, and it's okay to first be a little rigid and not want to transform into this new technology, because many are still hesitant. And I say it's okay because for me, my story was even 2 years ago when I first heard about Forum Analytics and I was sitting at a table at another company I worked for, our answer was no, we were not interested in this technology. It just didn't fit. But then the resilient mind, the one that's more flexible and not so rigid, lets you think about, okay, this is not going to take away our jobs or replace what we're doing. It's actually going to enhance it and make more efficient, and we're actually going to serve the client better. So if you put on a new set of glasses, which I had to before this, I had some other glasses that were reflecting weird. So Chris knows I had a second set, but put on a different set of glasses, you get a different view. You know that this is going to help. So I would say just that resilient mindset.
We're here to optimize, not replace. Help you guys and optimize what you're doing. I think I stole that word from a colleague of mine. So I agree completely. And I just want to thank you guys for taking some time to answer questions about, the past, the current, the future. And so Chris, what I'll ask you, thanks for jumping back here. Are there any questions that we got? Should we be thinking about, or I'll just kind of pass this over to you for.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we got one question from Steve Rianks, I believe. Sorry if I'm saying your last name wrong. And you look familiar. I know we just connected on LinkedIn, so it's great to see you here, Steve. Steve's question was, share with us why one call centers / 811s are still focused on damage prevention during construction and not on the front end of our risky, dangerous business, i.e. performing a rigorous utility investigation during planning and design. Thanks.
Can I start?
Sure.
So I actually know Steve. So hello, Steve. Steve and I work together, and I know he's up in Illinois. Illinois has 2 different 811 programs. They have one for the city of Chicago, and they have one for the rest of the state of Illinois. That story in itself. But the reason I believe is that they're so focused on damage prevention is because that's what their state laws mandate. It is a state law to call 811 in all 50 states before you dig. And unfortunately, unless you're going to be progressive, which I think Colorado just broke the ice in 2018, where they made it into their state law, where now there's an 811 call for SUE projects, which means they're receptive to providing the records. They're receptive to an 811 ticket, knowing that the dirt's not going to be excavated. There's not going to be any digging, any backhoes invasive around the utilities, but it's for the design process so that we can minimize upfront these risky projects, like Steve mentioned. I think it's going to take each state's legislature to put some some law in there, like Colorado did, and maybe we can influence as we move along there. But that's a good case study. That's why I think it's just because it's set that way in their statutes.
Fred, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
I think Wes nailed it pretty well there, in the sense that, from having worked in a couple states, at least California and Texas here recently, it is I think a good system that was implemented to get everything marked as soon as possible from all the different utilities. I might add that not all things are under 811. And that's why our business keeps going, because there's things that are not marked by 811, or one call, depending on where you're at. So yeah, I think the process, like everything else, is slowly getting better and better. But it is something that has to be legislated per state. And again, having worked in California and Texas, there's pluses and minuses on how they do things. I did do some work in Illinois. I'm from Illinois, in Chicago. So there are pluses and minuses from each and every state. And I think Colorado is doing good in being, at the forefront of it.
Awesome. Thank you guys for answering that. And 4:26, almost at 4:30. This it's not like we practice this or anything, but this is perfect for everybody that's got a meeting at 4:30 at the end of the day, which I apologize if you have 4:30 meetings. That's on Thursday. That would be a bummer, but we want to thank everybody for attending this masterclass. We hope that you found it valuable, and really hope that you can join us on December 14th for the last installment of this 3-part masterclass series on mapping the future. December 14th, we will be digging a little bit deeper into real-time data analytics for utility management. I'd like to extend my gratitude to our wonderful host and my colleague Lizzie, and for our amazing panelists Fred and Wes. You guys are awesome. I know I definitely learned a lot during this. And so it was a very thought-provoking discussion, and I'm sure that everybody that watched thought the same. So thank you guys so much, and hope to see everybody on December 14th for the last installment of this masterclass series.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Lizzie.
Thanks, everyone.
Good, Fred.
Good day.
Thank you.